Hello and welcome. Today you are back in the Binding program with me, Andrei Alokhin. Once again we have a writer of veteran literature visiting us. A veteran who took part in the war and wrote a book about all the events that happened there. We had a lot of examples of such literature. You all know them well, but this particular case is special. Because before the war, this veteran actually used to be a scientist, an economist, and as such was not accepted into the military because scientists were simply not allowed to become soldiers. Thus, this part of life had to remain hidden. Above all, this veteran is a very charming woman, young and beautiful lady that took part in the war. She's the author of the book called Sign Cassandra, Oksana Chorna.
Oksana Chorna.
Oksana, this is a very strange turn of fate. From an economist and from an absolutely respectable lady, you suddenly became a military ambulance driver. I understand that this is war and anything can happen, but tell me honestly, when you made a decision to join the military, to take the oath all by yourself, did you do this on the spur of the moment? Did at some point you just realize that this is what must be done and that you will just do it? Did you think how you would live your life and how did this happen?
На самом деле, я с Майдана еще была.
In fact, I've been immersed in this whole topic since the Maidan, and my friends who were at the Maidan after that went on to join the army. As for me, life in general, life should be interesting. It is very short, and you can't just get another chance. And if you are just sitting at home watching TV, then no matter what happens, you'll never notice it. Therefore, before the war, I had a plan to visit as many countries of the world as possible. At that time, I had visited 38 countries. Yes, I've worked for quite a long time in Poland, in Germany and in the United States. And I returned to Ukraine just a couple of years before the Maidan revolution started. In short, my life before the war was generally speaking quite chaotic. But thank God there was no wars and no bombardments. This didn't happen right away. I perfectly understand those people who did not go to war, because it was very scary on the front. The first time I went there was in May 2014, when my friend Serhiy Holtva went to serve in the army. I approached him and thought that I wound up on the set of the Second World War feature film, where people sheltered in carts that you expected horses would pull, and there were old ruined vehicles. They were dressed in jeans, wearing these simple iron helmets, and had only one set of body armor per platoon. That's the way it was back then. And I had such a feeling inside that if he dies, then it would have been my fault. They wouldn't be able to survive like that. They only had assault rifles and nothing else. I slowly started collecting materials, and the most interesting thing is that people gave me a lot of money. I don't know why. So I drove from one end of the city to another, and in several hours managed to collect 50,000 because I needed to buy helmets. I started driving around and stayed with them for longer periods. At first, they were brutally kicking me out because I was a woman in war. There is shooting and all other horrors of war. Then I somehow migrated and began living there. And in the summer of 2015, when the fighting was very fierce, one fine day, I decided that I would probably die anyway, but my mother needed the money. So I decided to legitimize my relations with the army and signed up. To be more precise, I was conscripted during the 5th mobilization wave, and I spoke with the brigade commander. For the brigade commander, this was quite a questionable decision. I was the only woman in the battalion. He immediately said, "Let's go, you'll be living at the brigade headquarters." I said, "No, I want to be here on the front line with my guys as an ambulance driver." "Oh, is that so? A candidate of economic sciences working as an ambulance driver?" So they wrote down that I only completed secondary education. So they concealed the fact that you are a candidate of economic sciences. No, it wasn't allowed. There was a reservation for scientists, and it was already impossible to conscript them at the time. So in this way, I was conscripted in Kurakhove and stayed to serve. I perfectly understand those who didn't answer the call. It was very scary out there. You understand, I, for example, remember that we were all told about the Second World War, where young male volunteers would claim to be several years older to be sent to the front line. I never thought that I would live to see a time when female candidates of economic sciences would hide their academic degree in order to get to the front line. You are an absolutely amazing person. And you know what? Since we've already started talking about the war, about how they get there, here's one completely amateurish question on my part. I'm a very civilian person. So tell me, how do soldiers pick their pseudonyms, namely their call signs? Everyone has a call sign. Sometimes they're exotic, and often they're quite interesting. Somehow they don't coincide. Is there some kind of a call sign database, or do they say like on the internet, This call sign has already been taken, or something else. How does this happen and what call sign did you have and so on? This is quite interesting for me.
На самом деле,
Actually, among rank-and-file soldiers, they usually choose one for themselves. If one doesn't pick a call sign quickly enough, something funny is given based on appearance, just like children do. This is just like in a Cossack army, when Sich Cossacks often gave names like Nepi Hata, Netudy Povidlo, and so on. This symbolized the abandonment of previous civilian life, and a completely new person was born that became a Cossack, a military man, who abandoned his past and his life as a peasant. So, in light of this, how exactly did you choose for yourself your special call sign?
на самом
In fact, for officers' call signs, as it were, they give a direction in which everyone has to pick their own call sign. At first we had flowers there. Then there were seasons, natural phenomena, clouds, storms, typhoon. And then when I came along, they picked Greek gods. And so I could be a Greek goddess there. I love Greek mythology, so I thought a lot about this. But names like Athena, Aphrodite were too much fancy for me. And it was then that I realized that Cassandra was just the perfect name to personify my whole life. Because in principle, when I tell people something, they don't believe me, never.
никогда
They never listen.
не слушают.
They don't listen, they don't believe, and they don't take it seriously. And it's always that way, and all the time until now that this happened constantly. Though some certain people for some reason started trusting me.
Начинают мне доверять.
For example, there were officers in the brigade that I was a part of. They took my words seriously. Indeed, they used some information that I had access to for their specific work. And so this is why I chose the call sign Cassandra. Actually, I used it very frequently in the time of war, because the main use of a call sign is to distinguish a person.
Выделяет человека.
Yes, because if we had Battalion Commander Serhiy, Deputy Battalion Commander Serhiy, Company Commander Serhiy, when we say Serhiy, nobody knows who is who. But I am Oksana, the only woman in the battalion with such a name. Therefore, I didn't use the call sign much, because it was clear what the conversation was about.
Понятно, о ком речь.
You know, here in the book, at the very beginning, there is a special glossary for civilians, for those who don't know what Kalupatar, Shishar, or Ural Matashka are. Everything is deciphered so that it's clear what is being said. There is a note that the military do not need to read. In general, the book is read in one sitting. Here, see what it looks like. Find and read Call Sign Cassandra. Let's talk about the book.
На самом деле,
In fact, the idea appeared a long time ago, when I still was in the military, and I thought it would be interesting. There were notes on Facebook. They were popular, and they gave me the opportunity to collect a lot of funding for my units. And everyone said, write more. But it never went anywhere beyond this write more. That is only on Facebook. And at some point in the fall, Martin Brest called me in Oman all of a sudden for no reason and said, Oksana, it appears as if you and I, and all your comrades, were not even present in this war and hero stars.
Поэтому садись.
And book will talk about those who were not even close to there. So sit down, stop messing around and write. This was such a decisive push that really, well, okay, you may not know about me, but why those people who really deserve to be remembered are not being immortalized anymore? And I decided that I should write about my comrades in this book. I wrote 67 short stories essentially about them.
При этом
At the same time, well, there is more. There was an idea, but it had to be brought to life. So I just had to sit down and write every day. Yes, this is the thing. After work. Yes, after work, very few writers work on writing as their day job. Here, writers usually engage in their work after working hours. Well, with such funding, it is difficult to work as a writer and earn a living.
тут таким решающим
Therefore, my husband played a key, decisive role. He set tasks for me and checked if they were done by 9 p.m. If it weren't for his insistence and these commands like, at 9 p.m. you will read me a story, I would not have done it. I just responded, yes, my commander, I'll read you a story.
читаю тебе рассказ.
Amazing.
Да, и вот он, причем
Yes, moreover, he also took part in these events, and still he found it interesting to hear this. Plus, he cleaned up a lot of technical issues in my texts. That is, what shoots from what weaponry, how machinery drives, and what call signs were there. He would call up all the soldiers and officers of other units to find the necessary information. This is why generally the information and text in the book are much closer to a documentary. Meaning this is not a fantasy, so to speak. Absolutely. All events are documented. All people and all call signs are genuine. There are a few exceptions due to individually safety concerns. Yes, I understand. For example, among these are the gorillas that helped us. They chose names for themselves and just said, call us like that. And I used those names to write about them. What other living writer can boast that their heroes choose their own names? Because it was dangerous to call them by their real names. Listen, it happened. And will there be more? That same Martin Brest you've mentioned earlier successfully published his Infantry 2 and perhaps Infantry 3 awaits us as well, and so on, because it's not just a matter of success. Is there a possibility that someday in the future you will perhaps make a sequel as well? Surely I would like to write about the years 2014 and 2016. My brothers in arms are waiting for this. Did you write about me and these events? It would be sooner or later, so I definitely will. That is a sequel, a prequel, everything will be just like in this book. Yes, I started with 2015 because in my memory this was the first time I evacuated KIA. That is, these were the first combat actions in which I took part directly. I mean, before that I was an observer and volunteer. Here I already crossed this line of volunteering and became a soldier. That is exactly these 3 months. That's why I in fact picked things up halfway through the story. Maybe a trilogy awaits us, and now we've read just its middle part, but I'm afraid I'm getting ahead of myself. I hope so.
Well,
in any case, you know, in one of your interviews, I read one absolutely amazing thing. It says about what a driver in the war is, when you are carrying WIA, the wounded, and then there is a shelling, mines are falling, and you should of course stop somewhere and wait it out and try to find some shelter. But you've been wounded, and their lives are taken away. Well, at that moment, you initially make a decision that you have already died. And if you act on this principle, then other decisions are very easily made. That is, when you go to war, you will definitely die. You might die now, you might die later, but there is a probability that is, if you are not a coward, you will not hide. You will risk your life in order to save others. I'm an ambulance driver. I must do this. And when I entered the war, I came there to save people. Such a turning point was one evacuation in the winter of 2014 when I was evacuating a tank crew that got blown up by a landmine. And there I stood on a road across the field on which a tank was burning. I could just stay there and nobody would say a thing. I'm just a girl after all, so why should I go there? And I remember that decision when I pushed the pedal and drove my vehicle to pick them up. That is, I made a decision that I wanted to help. And when a person makes such a decision, there is no opportunity to just say, oh, I won't drive there, there's shooting, but my life is there. And what about the life of the wounded soldiers? That is, you just have your duties, and you're obligated to fulfill them. So, in the end, this is the basic principle when you are in the throes of battle. You know, in war almost everyone takes pictures. If you have a mobile phone, then you certainly need to snap a photo, because in such circumstances you'll want to capture the events on film. Remember all that went down and show how it all happened. And our guest is no exception, but she didn't do this just for fun. She's a real photojournalist with a real camera and a real photo exhibition, which is currently being held in Kiev. I think that is a subject that is also worth talking about and showing viewers of our TV channel. Well, yes, I'm a photographer, and there was an idea to include photos in the book, but it really doesn't make sense, as it would not be a very convenient read. Yes. The book has illustrations based on photographs, but this is completely different. The photo exhibition is being held at the Museum of the Ukrainian Diaspora, and it includes various periods of life in the war from 2014 to 2018. Because last year I also visited my comrades in the war zone and also took pictures. It turns out that when I served, my camera was always with me, and in all situations where there was time and opportunity, I did my best to photograph soldiers, tried to photograph some comical situations, the movement of vehicles and training in shooting sessions. Of course, during difficult evacuations you don't have enough time for anything else, so there's absolutely no point in talking about it. Well, of course, but generally or overall, you can observe the life of a military battalions there. Listen, well, then I pose a direct question to you, though perhaps not a very pleasant one. In any case, some believe that many facts of the war were hidden from them. We live here, and very often soldiers who return from the front, especially to the nation's capital, suddenly find that there are light-filled avenues, cheerful young people in ripped jeans that drink cocktails, are having fun and watching some kind of comedy film or TV series. But when the topic is all about the spoils and hardships of war, they know very little, though they do somehow reluctantly realize it as something disturbing and a matter that is not worth knowing about and is not worth paying attention to.
О том, что тревожит и чего лучше не знать и не хочется знать.
Если сравнить,
If you compare this with the situation in the United States, when you enter a supermarket, you will see large stands pasted with photographs of soldiers who fought in Iraq. Their relatives come there, hang these photos on these stands, and this is done in an ordinary supermarket. That is, this is done at the state level. This is not the case here in Ukraine. Just like in Israel, when the whole city stops for a moment of silence, they really get up and really pay tribute to the dead. I mean, this should really be done at the state level. The fact that this is done as a private initiative is very positive. For example, the veteran stand, or programs filmed by people who are interested in this subject that is critical for society as a whole. But there is no government program, and there is absolutely no real propaganda to speak of.
пропаганды именно вот
Ну, я вам скажу, даже возвращаясь к литературе.
Well, I'll tell you, even with regards to literature, the veteran stand at Book Arsenal appeared rather, in spite of wishes expressed by the Book Arsenal administration, than thanks to them. You're absolutely right. And I want to ask you another question. Your life after the war. Here you talk about PTSD. It is present in all veterans, more or less, but every one of them has suffered from this. Every one of them has lived through this experience, and no one has managed to heal from this disorder unchanged. How do you live now?
год я, в принципе,
For about a year, I basically shut myself at home. It was very difficult for me to communicate with people, and I realized that I needed to change my environment so that I could change my state of mind in some way. So I left for Oman. I had offers to work there before the war, so I just made this decision now, because state of mind was simply destructive. While in Ukraine, I could not restore myself enough to be useful, and I needed to find the strength somewhere. The first year was very difficult, the second went easier, and this is exactly what gave me inspiration and allowed me to write a book, because writing a book is not really a cure. As they say, it is simply a way to pour out your soul and your grief.
вот ты изливаешь душу,
Well, yes.
Нет.
And you are recovering? No. You go back in time and live through all that again. Cry again and call your comrades. They're also going through all this hell again. I mean, this is the opposite. You're just reopening your old wounds that had already been healed. I understand. I mean, this does not have any positive effect. You know, I think I agree with you. But I'll still take the liberty to ask you to keep this up and keep on writing.
Не бросать. Пишите дальше.
You know, sometimes I just don't have the words. I don't know what to say. Perhaps I should convey my deep gratitude to our guest. Well, and let's wait for more books. Beginning of the story, continuation of the story. In any case, we will be waiting for it. Call Sign Cassandra, Oksana Chorna. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with our viewers.